I believe a lot of stuff that is mediocre gets funding out there. And it's all low-hanging fruit, and so much about what gets funded and what doesn't get funded all comes down to who did the work to put in the application. I would be like, this is the scope of my project. This is what I'm hoping to achieve with this. These are the requirements from the grant and what they're looking for. This is what I would hope you would speak to.
Welcome to the Chapman Cultural Center's YouTube channel. My name is Yasmin. I'm the Community Grants and Outreach Manager here at the Chapman. Be sure to click into our description box below to see the resources that are being used throughout this video so you can follow along. I hope that you learned something new, and I hope that this video helps you.
My how-to on grant writing, the step one would be identifying the type of funding that you're looking for before you even start looking, because the search process can be really overwhelming. So whatever you can do to sort of dwindle it down for yourself before you go to the mass internet to tell you where to go, I think that's better. So in just a brief, there are more ways to break it down than this, but how I've broken it down is looking at the type of funding, which would be like material, programmatic, professional development and training, government incentives, brick and mortar, and business and institutional. And that works both writers and visual artists. Those are the, large buckets of different types. So each one of these I introduce and then just break down what they are and how they're different. But I'm going to focus more quickly on the material costs for the visual artist, because that is something that is a more frequent grant that's out there. So material costs would cover the cost of supplies and equipment needed to complete a proposed project. So that's important to know that material is about the actual material. It's not about you. So when you get into programmatic grant writing, that's when material and your cost of labor start getting there. But understanding how and when to pay yourself is really important, and it breaks down there. So I have some tips on material grants. The ideas of dream really big, and this goes across the board for any grant. Dream as big as you possibly can, and then figure out funding to support that. And I feel like a lot of folks see a grant, and I've fallen into this too, see a grant and then try to figure out how to force their project into the grant requirements. And a lot of times that ends up being a bad fit for both you and the grant. And so you're spending a lot of energy to truncate your vision in order to meet something that feels sort of arbitrary because they're looking for a specific thing that maybe you weren't even that thing before you even got to the page. So just across the board, no matter what kind of grant you're looking for, take the time to just draw out and scope out your entire project as I have all the time in the world, I have quit all my jobs and I'm feeding myself wonderfully, and all the resources are around me and I have all the technical assistance possible. And map that out and then look at it and say, okay, how do I then make this a little bit more manageable, a little bit more manageable, a little bit more manageable? And sometimes when you do that, you can find that, oh, I don't even need to apply for a grant. I just need to figure out how to raise $500 and I can accomplish it myself. So do that kind of initial planning and then figure out what fits that dream best. So yeah, and then these just go down the list and they'll repeat themselves because there's planning that will just be the same across the board. But with material ones, you want to make sure that you have you list all of the materials, and that really sits down and you're having a conversation with yourself of what am I assuming versus what is happening? So if I was to do a material budget to do an after-school program with youth around art or something, maybe my idea of art supplies is just as generic as that. And I really need to get down to I want 10 boxes of markers and I want Prismacolor markers so they're really nice and they last a long time. Then I'm going to price that out. And sometimes we think really big and miss those small details. So it's learning how to do both of those things, the big and then the practical. And then you make your budget from there. And then, before I start in on any grant, I'm always looking for like, what are the requirements of it before I get into it. So I'm making a sort of a task list on both ends. So a lot of grants come with reporting of some sort. So making it before you even get into it, an understanding of, okay, I'm going to have to save my receipts. I'm going to have to log my hours and stuff like that so that it becomes a part of the planning before you start to submit. So yeah, and if you keep going through the document, it just continues that breakdown. But I'm going to skip ahead to where I get past the tip number 1 into tip 2 and 3 and 4, and then I'll turn it over to John. But I hope that this is useful, and I will make myself available for anyone that wants to talk about this, because I should preface my talk before I start it. I believe a lot of stuff that is mediocre gets funding out there. And so it's like a part of my mission to work with artists to get your stuff funded, because you make great work and great stuff needs to be funded. And it's all low-hanging fruit, and so much about what gets funded and what doesn't get funded all comes down to who did the work to put in the application. And I think writers, especially how we train, not writers, I'm sorry, visual artists, how we train them, they are constantly told that they are not writers. And there's a lot of things that people just don't go after, thinking like, oh, I'm a visual artist, I communicate this visually, and so I'm gonna not go after these things because it would require a different skill set. And I just want everyone to feel really encouraged to know that like, you can push through this, you can figure out how to put words on the page, you can have friends that help you edit these things and put your ideas out there because they deserve to be funded. And if we don't do that, we have a lot of art out in the world that we end up having complaints about of why our city spent money on that when they could have spent money on something else. So let this be your empowering thing, like make great art and get it out in the world, and I will help you in whatever way I can. So flipping through, I'm sorry, there's so many pages. I'm going to the back where it's beyond the business initiatives. So we're on step 2. So once you figured out what kind of grant you want and what you're looking for, after I said like you plan out your project first, figure out which ones support that and what you qualify for, then you would move on to step 2, which is searching for grants and where do you go. And it depends on what type of grant you're looking for. But just off the bat, and I'm sorry, I wrote this when I was living in North Carolina, so just pretend that North Carolina Arts Council says South Carolina Arts Council. But if you live in North Carolina, go to North Carolina Arts Council. But just quick ones on there, artdeadline.com. That's one that is not heavily promoted, but it's one of the oldest like art clearinghouses for all kinds of opportunities. So I would look there. Artworkarchive.com, artistrelief.org, and the National Endowment for the Arts. And then I would say, like, go really local too. Like, what is your county's grant offering? What is your region grant offering? Sometimes there's Southern specific grants out there. And just try to like keep an eye on just swimming in those searches. And don't go after every single one of them because you'll tire yourself out. Really, like, if you have your planned already, things that you will read will just spark like, oh, I think this is a natural connection to the thing that I put together. So finding what grant you want to apply. And then your step 3 is do your homework. And I think this is a really important one that people routinely bypass. Like they're super excited about their idea and they just get to the like submission part of it. And what you really want to do is take a step back and research where this grant money came from, research who's in charge of it, where is it coming from, how is it being used, research who got it last year. I can't tell you how many grants that I've put in that I'm like, why didn't that project work out? And then I do a back step and I look, oh my gosh, they funded the same exact program the year before. So this gets into like, sometimes the decisions of what gets funded and what doesn't has nothing to do with your project, and it has so much more to do with what happened last year, what is their projected goals of this year, and stuff like that. So the more information you can give yourself to figure out, is this a best fit for me before you start, the better. that also applies to doing a lot of the work that is required for the grant ahead of time. So you're operating on your own cycle versus the deadlines that are presented in front of you. So, creating your own budget and creating your own reporting style and things like that. And then also one of the things about people that give money is they want to know that you know who they are. And they want to know that you've looked into them and why you think that they should be in partnership with you, because that is what a grant is. It is you're becoming in partnership with the people that are giving it to you. So the more that you can tell them that you know what their agency is about, you know where their past giving was, you know how you could fit best into their organizational plan, and what a great opportunity you are to help them with their mission, the better. And that goes across writers and visual artists. I think that's anyone that applies for grants. And there is a little bit about a funder's ego that they like to be told that, they're doing a good job. And this is why you're committing to this amount of time to go through the application process. So before you start, I like to answer these questions, and if I say no to any of these, I move on past that grant. And maybe I'll write down a calendar date of when the next assumption would be for their next cycle, and I look again. But I don't linger on ones that aren't a good fit, because that's just a waste of your time. So before you start, I like to think about, do I qualify for this? And that's really reading the just black and white what is in front of you, because you can pretend that you might qualify, but you really get to it and you're like, no, that's I truly live outside of that county. I can't justify that my zip code isn't what it is or whatever, or I'm not 35, those kind of things. So really understand, do you qualify? And then I mark down, when is the due date? What are the supplemental materials that I need? So a lot of grants have not just your application, but they might require letters of recommendation to be on there. They might require a portfolio to be there. So I create a checklist of what are all the materials that I need for this before I even start. What is this organization about? I went over that. What is their mission statement? Do they have a frequent asked questions? I feel like that's one of those websites, pages that get really overlooked, but there's a lot of information to go back to what I was saying about figuring out who's been funded before, what have past projects look like, does my work complement this, does it contrast it, things like that. And then what have they funded in the past? So answering all of that before I even look at submitting anything. And then step 4, from there, I make a timeline. I take the due date and I work backwards. So I'm looking at key points of when do I need certain things to be returned to me or approved or whatever your grant cycle requirements are. Just working backwards from that calendar so that you understand where you need to be along the cycle, so that this is all to avoid the night before nightmare of you trying to put together a package that then comes out looking like you did it the night before. So that kind of prep work might feel extra, but it's going to show up in the presentation of your files. The more organized you can be, the more trustworthy you are to an agency to handle the money that they're giving you. And then a part of step 4 is, I always say, give folks at least a month to write your letters of recommendation, especially if you want a good one. And understand that people are really, really busy. And so asking folks to write you something really complimentary quickly is a really hard task. I also have relationships with the people that I have asked stuff for, and it's not unsurprising for somebody to say in a tight deadline, you write it, I'll sign it, but it's just, you're not capturing the diversity of your submission if you're also the one writing it. So give folks enough time to really do that, and it also gives you enough time to be that wasn't as supportive as I needed it to be. I need to find out another way. So maybe also add to that, maybe ask one more person than you need to in order to pick the top few. I was in a group project one time that was a nightmare, where we gave the person plenty enough time to write it, and she wrote a recommendation that was not excited about our project at all. And we were scrambling to try to figure it out. And I was like, this is an odd way to find out that you don't really like what we're doing, but things happen. So like give yourself the space for things happen.
Would you recommend them to be focused? I mean,
Yes.
focused to the recommendation?
Yeah, no, that's a perfect thing to bring up. Like anytime I would ask, I would be like, this is the scope of my project. This is what I'm hoping to achieve with this. These are the requirements from the grant and what they're looking for. This is what I would hope you would speak to. Or this is why I'm asking you specifically, because you're standing in the community or whatever. You can push folks to what and that makes their lives so much easier. So all the information you could possibly give the person that writing your letters, the better. And they can pick and choose too and figure it out. But yes, thank you for raising. That's a great point. And then step 5, write your grant. Grants can feel really overwhelming at times, and it's easy to psych yourself out. Just breathe and keep writing. And my tip always for that, especially as somebody that did not write grants until writing grants was forced upon me, was my mentor in that situation gave me the best advice of, you just start at the beginning, and if you can't write a question and you can't answer it, move on to the next one. And you just keep making that pass until all of the information is filled out. And, you can flag things that you're like, oh, I need more research on that, and come back to it. But just maintaining that momentum of like, I'm writing something in each one of these like boxes until it's all full is better than getting to the second question and spending hours just like turning your wheels on it. Because sometimes, it's those shower moments where like you can chew on something, walk away from it, feel really defeated, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I have the perfect answer for that. And like we all need to give ourselves space to do that. So that is my step 5. And then I have some grant writing tips, and I'm sure like you're going to repeat some of these, but this is how I do it. I copy and paste all my questions into a new document. So I'm always working on my own stuff. I'm never working on their submission page until I'm ready to submit. I paste and highlight the word count for each section and question. This is extraordinarily important, especially in these days and age where people are getting almost like sometimes 1,000 more submissions than they were the previous grant cycle or the one before that. So the amount of submissions are increasing, and that gives folks permission to throw your stuff out for the tiniest infraction. So if you go over, someone can just scan it. They're not even scanning for content at that point. They're not even in the judging round. They're just like the first round of folks to weed things out, and they're going to throw your stuff out. So really, like, as much as artists, and I love this about us, are rule breakers, that is not the time. Grants are really about how well can I, cross my T's and dot my I's in the exact format that they're asking me. Because like I said, you're just giving them permission to throw you out and not consider you for the content. And your stuff might be the best thing on that pile, but you went over by 50 words, The other thing is, I'll get to that. So yeah, the next one is answer the questions exactly. And so this happens a lot when you go up for state and like federal stuff. They will end up asking you what feels like the same question 4 different times in the grant. The instinct, because I think of our training in creative writing classes, is to like try to answer it in a different way to give them a variety. But sometimes what you don't realize is they ask you that question that many times because they're sectioning out those questions to different jurors. So sometimes the person reading question 5 is not the person that's reading question 1, even though they're the same question. So you want to be able to answer it every single time in the exact same way. And using the language of the question in your response is always a key way to make sure that you're on that point. Because like I said, when I was first writing, I thought of it more as a creative writing thing. And so I was like, well, they asked this in, the second one, so I'm going to embellish and make it more flowery and like also talk about this other random thing. And like, no, that was awful. I didn't get any of those. Don't do that. And then again, the word count, don't go over the word count and don't go significantly under. Because if you go significantly under, that gives sometimes the impression that you don't think highly of the question that you were just asked. So, you want to give it its due credit. I'm not saying create a lot of filler in there, but really try to like suss it out as just like an individual prompt and you're putting the same amount of effort that you did on the ones that might have been easier to answer. And then use your tools to help you build your content. I have other tools in there, but there's a lot of things like logic models and things like that that can help you generate the writing for your project before you get there. So like, I would go for writing tips online and figure out how to best fill that out. But you can create content and then you just plug and play, basically. And then, like I said, you don't have to work in a linear way. You can get stuck. You can move on to another section. You can come back to it. All of this stuff. It's all about what works best for you. And then, like, again, this is not a creative writing assignment, even though it could support your creative writing. But this is really about, think about, you want to write to both the CEO of a company and the random person that they grabbed off the street to look at your thing. And you want both folks to be able to understand what you're saying. So clarity is always important and like the most important thing you can do. And then, when you get your awesome grant and you make your awesome thing happen, then you can write all the flowery language about how amazing and important it was, because it was. But grants are not the space for that. So my step 6, find an editor. This is super important. Everybody needs an editor. Everybody could be edited. And a lot of times I try to reach out to folks that are not in my field to be able to answer that. Does this come off clear to somebody else? So I love working with like mathematicians and sociology folks, like some people that are in the humanities or other STEM areas, and just be like, without your background in the arts, can you understand what I'm trying to say? And getting feedback from them is really great. And then step 7, find a friend. Again, these outside people. So I want to iterate that, like, editing is also really important, but getting it around to multiple people is also another way to gauge that reaction, because folks have different backgrounds and they could have a different approach, or like have issue with a language and that needs clarity. That maybe somebody that's closer in your circle just understood what you were saying. And then we're getting towards the end. Step 8, repeat. Step 7 and 8. Just keep going around and keep asking folks. And I love the idea, especially with places like Mayfair, of like you all becoming your own peer group and doing this work for each other. Because, you might do it for somebody and then they'll be able to do it for you the next time around. But like really keeping those tight relationships and fostering them, and then always gifting people things like when they're done, either, a card or candy. I really like chocolate, so I will do a lot for you if you just drop me off some dark chocolate. That's great. But just trying to nurture those relationships, knowing that like you will also be in a position to help them too, because this is a tide lifting all boats situation. And again, the goal is for all of us to have our stuff out there and to make better art in public spaces. And then we get to step 9, gather and submit. I think this is one of the most important ones, obviously, because it's submitting, but and just that idea that it takes very little to throw your application out. So being as organized as humanly possible. And this really comes from like my federal stuff where, if we had the wrong cover page on the wrong whatever, like that was enough to just completely decimate a project. So really understanding what is the order of submission that they want, what is the exact, like they want the cover letter before the letters of recommendation or vice versa, and creating a checklist on your computer, or I like handwriting it so I have the satisfaction of checking it off and just going over it multiple times before you give yourself that, all right, now I'm going to submit it. And this goes back to the very beginning of setting your due date first and then working back and understanding you really want a lot of space towards the end so that you don't feel like you're presenting a scramble, that you are as tight and as organized and as to the letter as possibly can. And then number 10, which I think is the best step possible, celebrate. Because you just wrote a grant, and that is really hard, and that's a thing that a lot of people do not do. And the fact that artists like survive is because we do hard work. And I think it's one of those great moments that if you can celebrate the ending of it, it sort of doesn't matter if you get it or not. And I will say, as my wrapping up point, this is a numbers game. And it's not only like, yes, you will get better in time, but it's really about like the more you put out there, the more you get back. feedback. So do not be discouraged about the first rejection. There's going to be tons of rejection before you get things, just like any other aspect of art making or writing. So, taking the moments to just celebrate the accomplishment of getting it done, I think really sets the tone that you're about celebrating you and your accomplishments. And then if people recognize that and reward you for it, that's awesome. If they don't recognize it, it means that it wasn't meant for them. It was meant for somebody else. So you just keep on that journey until that somebody else comes about. But really, seriously, it is numbers, it is numbers, it is numbers. So many people try it once, get a rejection, and then they stop. And you look at anybody that is successful in either of these fields, and it is because they have weathered the storm of rejection. So, yeah. That's my little Grant 101.
So who's feeling a little bit stressed? Is everybody okay? I'm curious, how many of you have applied for a grant for your own work? One person.
Awesome.
Okay, awesome. Well,
that changes today.
So whether you're applying as a writer or an artist, think of this as it's just storytelling. You're telling your story as an artist. And so you're going to have different forms and different requirements and different questions for different funders, but ultimately you're talking about yourself. And so I'm going to skip through a lot of mine's the one with the dinosaurs if you didn't figure it out. With writers, the process is the same regardless of your medium. Basically, what you're doing is you're telling your story and you're presenting a portfolio of work, and you're asking for money. That's kind of the nutshell of the grant. And with writers, typically, the terms might be fellowship, which would just be money to give to you to work on whatever. It might be a project if, for example, you want to self-publish a book or produce your own short film. Sometimes it's prizes. And so the terminology and the vocabulary may be a little bit differently, but ultimately you're asking for money to support yourself. And funders, they want to know who you are. And so think about, in telling your story, it's like, take a step back from, it's not just like a routine cut and paste job letter. And with bios, they can give people, sometimes will put in, I graduated from University of South Carolina in 2017 and got a BFA and like just sort of wrote. And that's not what they're really looking for. And some funders don't really care where you went to school, if you've got a degree at all. And so think about, who am I as an artist or writer, and what is that story? And I do recommend that you have two bios. One is the 100 to 150 word bio, and then one is the longer bio, because you may be asked for both. And just have both of those. I think with you'll get asked questions like, what's your artist statement, what's your vision, things like that, and that's where you can elaborate on what you want to do, what your career aspirations are. But not every application is going to ask you for that. But it's something to think about, and it's always going to be more than like, I like abstract landscapes, or I like children's literature. It's always more than that. And you're not writing a museum curated review of yourself or anything, but talk about what it is and who you are, more than just, well, I like this type of work. One of the things I might add, so there's a couple of repetitive pages in here. This is my fault. I created this on Prezi, and when I exported it, it repeated some of the screen, so my apologies for that. I killed a couple extra trees. But think about, what is it that you really need? And that's going to depend, that goes back into what Mo was talking about, is like, are you looking for money and time? Like, are you looking for money that's going to pay your time because you have to take off from work to go write or paint for a week and a half? Or are you looking for supplies or funds that you can use for anything. And it's really going to vary by funder. I have won grants for myself, both for film and for creative writing. And one grant I got was for an advertisement. It let me pay for an advertisement in a journal for my novel that came out. One grant helped fund a short film that I wrote, and then, but that's going to vary by funder. So when you know what you need, that helps you then look for the funders that are going to support what you need. Oh, practice telling this to someone else who is not your best friend or your mom. That goes into what Mo was saying, is like let somebody else read it. Is what you wrote clear? Do they understand who you are and what you want to do? And don't be upset if they say no, because you would rather them say no than the funder. And so don't let it be somebody who already knows you. Think about what your elevator pitch is. Like, what is it you need? It's always more than I need money. Yes, we need money, but it's always, your story is more than that. It might be, I need supplies to finish a large-scale commission canvas that will go into the children's wing of the cancer clinic. Or I need funds to attend a writer's conference where I'll learn how to pitch literary agents and manage my website. And really talk about what it is you need. The repetitive slides are throwing me off. One thing about budgeting, so when you're budgeting for a project, if you're working on a large-scale commission, not commission piece, if you're working on a large sculpture or large canvas or a production of a play, your budget is going to be what it's going to cost you to do the whole thing. That budget might not be what you give to that funder, because that funder might say, well, we can't pay for refreshments and craft. You know, every short film has a craft cart. That's where people get their snacks and you feed them. But your budget for your project is going to be, it might be different than what you're going to present. Like a budget for a short film might easily be $12,000 to $15,000. The funder may offer a grant for $2,500 and they want to know what you're going to spend the money on. I've seen some large-scale sculpture works that are, $100,000 easy, but that might not be the full budget that goes to the funder. So know what your budget is, and in your budget, pay yourself. Like, remember that you're doing this for a living. So if it takes you 40 hours to stage manage and direct a play that you've written, put that in your budget. What do you pay yourself? You might not be able to give that to every funder, but don't forget to pay yourself in your budget. You know that you're going to have to take off 1 week of work to go do this project. What do you get paid those 40 hours? If you lose that money because you're not salaried or for whatever reason, but if you lose that money, make sure you're paying yourself for your work. Funders do want you to succeed. Like, they're not trying to trick you. So the application might be confusing, might be overwhelming, something might not make sense, something might be unfair in the application, because that does happen. They're not trying to trick you. They do want you to succeed. You just have to remember, maybe my audience is somewhere else. Maybe this is not the funder for me. Show them how they can help. So how will a grant help? You'll often get asked, how will this fellowship, this grant, this prize help you? So think about it. How will this help your work? It's not just that it's going to let you finish this canvas or put on this play, but how will it push your career forward? Like, they want to know that this is really going to help you, because if you're super grateful, then they know you're going to talk about them and say, oh my God, this was such an amazing grant. Does it fund critical equipment like a laptop or a potter's wheel or a special kind of easel or a GoPro or a gimbal camera? Like, how is it going to help your career? Does it fund the time off from work for you? Every once in a while, you'll look at a grant that they want to know the impact beyond you. Like, that's where you get into project grants for artists, where they want to know how your project that you're trying to get funded is going to impact the community. You need to know what your community needs and how your grant is going to help them. So if, for example, one that so I've been a grant writer for organizations. I've also been on the funder side, and I'm thinking of a project where it was a series of children's books written by a group of Black creatives, and the books featured Black children as the primary characters. And if you're not in the literature world, it's like single-digit percentages of children's books where the kids are not white. Drastic need in the literary world. There's plenty of data on it. And so this project, not only did they have this data, but they had this story written for 4 to 6 graders, featuring kids that look like them, written by artists from that community. And so the impact on those books was phenomenal, and they had already sold one, and their story was amazing because they got rejected by traditional publishers, and so they started self-funding on their own. And so we bought a bunch of books as a way to fund them because their impact, they could easily show like how many kids were reading these books and grabbing the books off the shelves. And so think about, if you're doing a project that's going to benefit your community, know what the community need is and know how your work is potentially going to help that community, because you really can get paid to do some of these projects where you're helping the community. References. So Mo talked a little bit about references. Sometimes you're asked for more than one. Sometimes the references, they want to know if you can finish a project. So think about, one of your references might need to be somebody who maybe they don't know your craft, but they've worked with you and they can say, oh yeah, Jane knows how to manage a project to the end. Like Jack can really get this done. So pay attention to the grant and what they're really looking for. And if they say, contact us with any questions, contact them. I have personally found, so I've written grants to 3 state arts commissions. They are really good at answering the phone, answering emails, and they will answer questions. And so if you have a question, don't be afraid to ask them. Some funders, you may not hear from them, don't worry about it. But like state arts commissions, they do want to help you because they are also not the ones who are scoring the application. Mm-hmm. So they'll walk you through and say, well, I really think you need to work on this piece. This is what the reviewers were looking for last year. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Oh, Mo covered this. I'm going to repeat it. Proofread, don't rush it. One of the things that I've seen as a reviewer is if you are doing visual work and you're taking photographs of your work to submit, make sure you take clear photographs, but also take a close-up image. A lot of work, if your work is highly detailed, whether it's fiber or drawing or painting, make sure you get a really good close-up picture as well, because that detail helps the reviewers who are looking at a computer screen with this artwork and they're like, oh, well, that's interesting. But then when they see the close-up, they're like, oh, there's like hidden text in this drawing. And so just don't forget the benefit of close-up work on your work. Never rely on a funder to remember you from anything, because they may not be the reviewers. It may be a new batch every year. Let's see, what else? One of the things that I've encountered with my artist friends is, how many of you have a website? I'm just curious. A few hands are up. On those of you who have a website, do you have a running list of things that you have done or been in? A couple of head nods. Those of you who don't have a website, do you have a running list somewhere of everything that you've done or been in? A couple of nods. If you don't worry about it. Just start it today and work backwards. And I would say track everything. Don't leave something, don't think, oh, well, that show is kind of small, or that publication doesn't exist anymore. Put it on there, because you never know if the reviewer at one point loved, there was a publication out of London called Glitter Wolf. Amazing name. It ran for, I think, 10 issues, 10 years, something like that, and the guy just got tired. But they did quality work, and somebody's like, oh, I remember that magazine. You never know when that's going to happen, so don't dismiss anything. Don't leave something off your list, and if you don't have that list, don't worry about it. Start today and work yourself backwards. and add to it as you remember stuff. So I've got two things at the end, and then we'll jump to questions. So I've got a list of regardless of where you live, look at your state arts commission, look at your state film alliance, look at your humanities council. That will depend upon the type of work you're doing. Your local arts agency, sometimes local arts agencies or local arts organizations like Chapman sometimes will have a small grant pool, and if it's like $500 and an easy application, cut your teeth on that. Because if that buys you a potter's wheel, that's $500 that went in your pocket. Can think about everything you do. If you have a website, you pay $15 a month. I pay $15 a month on Squarespace. A website grant would pay for that for a year. The National Endowment for the Arts. If you live in South Carolina, the South Arts has individual grants and fellowships. Some of them are really large. And then if you're a writer, I threw in a couple of places here. Sometimes it's good for grants. Sometimes so Funds for Writers is a good website for grants. Poets and Writers is really better for submissions. And then residencies, if you all are looking for residencies and fellowships, Alliance. It used to be called the Arts. Alliance of Artist Communities is what it used to be called. It's something like Alliance of Artist Communities. They've changed their name. But that's a good place to look for residencies, not much grants, but residencies, whether you're an artist or a writer. Mm-hmm. The last page of this, I am sharing with you personal information. This is what I'm using right now to track my applications for fellowships, for grants, and for jobs. So you will see, and this is new for me. Last year I did it on a yellow notepad. Don't do that. Don't do that. But you can see here I've got who, what, deadline, when I submitted it. If I've gotten a response, there's a lot of no's. The link to it, and then all the others are what they're requiring. And like Mo, I draft my first draft in Google Docs. I don't do it in the platform. Mm-hmm. A lot of funders are sticklers for their deadlines. I will say that I have found a handful, if you start the application, they will extend the deadline for you. And by starting the application, what that often means is you simply click start, put your name in it. And they typically tend to be platforms, funders that use Slide Room. And so I don't know if that's a particular application platform, but that's what I've noticed is that the ones that I've gotten the extensions on tend to be the ones that are using that platform. So they must make it easy for the funder. But I hope this is helpful. Like I'm going through this process right now because I don't know what I'm doing in a month. And so this is how I'm keeping tabs on it. And you will see some of these I ran up against the deadline and I couldn't get it submitted. It's on here because then I can take this list next year and do it again if I need to. So that's all I have. I really want to hear from you all, and I feel like we've spoken quite a bit. So any questions or anything?
Yeah.
So I'm looking through, say, like submitting work samples. What if you're changing genres entirely? So I've been a nonfiction writer, have a book, write for clients, paying the bills, but I'm trying to get out into the fiction. So how would you just submit things that like I've published in magazines and nonfiction and show that, hey, I can write, but I'm trying to, change genres now. So what would you suggest with that? I need to get some work done first before I invent genre, before I go after it.
Well, and so I'm assuming are you talking about getting published with the fiction, or are you talking about getting a grant?
Getting a grant.
Okay.
So that I can potentially be published in fiction.
Got it, okay.
Live and write fiction instead of writing for clients.
Mm-hmm.
I would check the guidelines, because if they're asking you for a fiction submission, then you will not want to submit nonfiction that's been published.
Right.
a lot of there is a gray area where nonfiction as fiction, fiction as nonfiction. But check the guidelines first. If they simply ask for a writing sample, apply. If you are charged a fee to apply for a grant, question it. Literary contests are a little bit different. Some art fairs charge a fee. I have a personal sort of boundary with that, and Mo, you may have one that's differently, but like if it's a literary contest, I will not pay more than $5 to submit, and I will only pay if they're clear that those fees are then going into the pot that goes back as cash awards to the writers. I've submitted to a couple of art competitions, and my rule there is if I know it and I trust it, I'll pay up to $25 to submit. I've not done the arts festivals where you buy a booth or things like that, but that's my personal take on fees, but I wanted to throw that out there.
Also, you can write your fees off. So keep that in mind. Knowing that makes me not have a cap.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I like, obviously, I don't want to go broke on applications. So I really think through if it's above 30, but I feel like there are some really big career changing art, like the next level from where I'm at, that they are averaging around $45 for an application. And I understand like a lot of that does go through paying the admins that run that organization, and they provide a lot for that. So that's also how I weigh it out. It's like, oh, this is a hefty fee, but if I get it, they're going to pay me a monthly stipend. I'm going to get a studio space. They're going to pay for a solo show. Like the reward for getting it is so much greater than the fee. I just try to keep like a rolling tab on how much that is, and also save all those receipts so I can write them off. Yeah. You had a question though.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. I was just wondering, like, for people who are trying to revise their artist statements, like, how do you recommend someone being able to zoom out and look at their body of work and be able to be concise and specific about what their work is about and why they made it?
Yeah. So I can speak to like one of the best advice that I ever got was thinking about it as a triangle. And like triangles, you could put, you could move which comes first, whatever. But the first one being, who am I? The second one being, what do I make? Like literally, what do I make? Like I make paintings, I make sculptures. Like what do I make? I write fiction, And then the next point being what materials I use and why. And with that, you can create a killer artist statement that doesn't even get into the like massively confusing art language that a lot of people utilize and I think overutilize. And I can't tell you how often I've been told in positions where I've been successful that one of the things that I was successful at was, oh my God, I could read your artist statement and I understood what you're saying. Because that's what people want. Like we can add a lot of language and like a lot of that work should be left to like the critics. And I am a super, like I've spent a ton of time in art theory and criticism classes. I have an insane affinity for hard art language. I will go to the mat on some of my favorite authors that other people want to burn to the ground. I understand that. But really, like it's communicating. You're saying, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is how I do it. And people need to be like, yes, I understand what this person is before I'm like moving forward with them, whether it's giving you an opportunity to show with them or money. And I think that also comes down to writers as well. I think that's, very precise on like what you're doing as well,
Yeah, you.
So as a visual artist, what kind of projects do get the most traction?
It depends on where you are for funding. So if you're in a space that has like, one of my favorite examples is like Kentucky Art Council. I'm from Kentucky. They have tremendous amount of money and they spend it in all kinds of different ways. And it's really amazing. The amount of grants that are out there to just support an artist living and being an artist is so much bigger than other places. And so you just like want to pay attention to like go sort of that like centric circles out, like what is my first closest ripple, and then go out from there. So like what is my county, what is my city, what is my state, and understanding that. And sometimes you can see like a trend, like, you know, in places where like there's heavy revitalization kind of things, like there's a lot of energy to like redo old buildings or talk about history because we have so much, you know, new growth and stuff like that. Like you can tailor what you would be interested in proposing based on the trends of what's around you and sort of lean into that. So, you know, one of the things that coming down here for our fellowship, because our fellowships are also a form of grant writing, I leaned really heavy into the labor and material history of place. And that led me to mills being a great fit. And I think that's one of the reasons why I got this, because people could understand our mill history is a labor history, and we're like in a growth transition. So there might be usefulness to bring up that type of history, you know, those kind of things. So I would really go after that. And then the other end is like going back to that, like dream big, and then sort of figure out, okay, who are the other artists that are doing what I want to do? Where did they get their funding, and how do I do that pipeline? And I am not above like stalking people and figuring out, like, I want to be where you are. So I'm looking at who are you paying attention to online? Who are you going after? What are the shows you're interested in? And going after those same things and sort of, you know, going down a path that's already been trotted for you, knowing that like, I want to be in that proximity. So if I was somebody that really wanted to get into like large steel work and get funding for that, I would be seeking out, all right, who are the steel artists I'm watching? Where are the foundries that they're going? Who supports? Going to the bottom of people's websites is a huge cue on that, because like it's going to tell you where sponsorships came from, and you know, just doing that like work, because sometimes that's a way easier path to align yourself with something that's actually going to work for you than just going to search for calls. You know, because there's so much stuff out there. You can spin your wheels on a lot of things that like don't actually get you where you want to go. So find somebody that's there and then sort of do a reverse engineering. That would be my biggest suggestion.
I would add to that too, South Arts gives out state prizes and then a big fellowship, and the fellowship is like $25,000. They call it a fellowship, but it's actually a grant. And they do that every year, and they rotate disciplines. And so that would be a good example of like who in the South is getting these large grants and seeing what type of work. And you know, they've funded photographers, they've funded painters, and so seeing who is getting the work and the type of work they're doing can give you some kind of guidance sometimes.
So they'll fund just someone being an artist sometimes?
That grant, yeah, absolutely. So the South Art State Fellowship, so if I remember right, they have a 9-state region, and each state gets one winner, which I think is a $10,000 prize, and then there's one overall for the region, which is $25,000, and that's just unrestricted cash to you.
Mm-hmm.
Mississippi Arts Commission has one, and it's up to $5,000. I don't know what South Carolina is. Do you know what South Carolina is?
No, I don't know what South Carolina is. I know North Carolina does not offer those. They used to, but they don't anymore. Yeah.
South
Yeah.
Carolina has something called South Carolina Arts Commission.
Mhm.
They came down here, I don't know, a year ago or whatever, and had a talk. They offer a variety of different types of grants
That's awesome.
for different artists.
Yeah.
They also have an artist directory, so if you guys are not on that directory, you should apply to get on there, because it also opens opportunities for you. So I would go on their site, South Carolina
Arts Commission.
Yeah.
Arts Commission. One thing that I'll mention about them as well too, glad that you mentioned them, because they actually have been doing a tour of the state, and they came here. But what was really encouraging about them is the time that they spent here. Of course, they referred everybody to the website. The website is rich with opportunities, but one of the cool things that really stood out is that they did emphasize, if you have questions about anything, they have the phone number that you can call, and it is a real person that will talk with you one-on-one to find out about you and your specific need. I have a friend of mine, of course, you know, my focus is, of course, Spartanburg County. A good friend of mine is in Greenville County. When I learned more about the South Carolina Arts Commission, I said, dude, I met these folks, they're awesome. Tell them Tony told you to go to the website, give them a call, and then I followed up with him, and he actually had some good conversations that led to him going from one level to the next level with his initiative. So I'm glad that you mentioned that because that's the resource for our state.
Yeah.
If I could say, sorry, I know
Oh, no, you're fine.
my talk.
Yet.
I benefited from them. When they were here, they talked about something called the Art Entrepreneur Incubator Program.
Mhm.
And that's something they do twice a year. I applied for it. I mean, it's like applying for a grant.
Yep.
And you have a bunch of requirements, you have to fill out the form and think about what you're gonna write, get recommendation letters, blah, blah, blah. But this particular one, I was the only one from Spartanburg County. There's almost nobody from the upstate, maybe one other person from Greenville, that's it. Everybody's from Charleston, so we need representation there, guys. And they helped me to create a business plan for my art practice. So up until this point, up until last year, I was doing mostly teaching painting events. But I started painting murals last year, and I fell in love with it, and I decided I want to move my art practice in this direction. I want to paint murals. I want to do it. That's what I do. So I applied to them saying, I've been teaching art, like painting events, stuff like that, for maybe 5 years now, but I want to shift in this direction, and because that's kind of a new field, they helped me to write a business plan.
That's wonderful.
It's a cool looking business plan, and
Yeah.
it makes you, if you have a business plan for your practice, it's good to do because it really makes you think about what you do, why you want to do it, your vision statement, money, which we all hate thinking about, but we have to, budgeting, stuff like that. It was really a great program. It was a 6-week program, and they gave me a check for $200 at the end. So it was a great program. Plus, they paid me for my time that I was there. So once a week, I had to be on a Zoom call for a couple hours.
And then it's the Arts Commission here?
Yep. South Carolina
That's
Arts
awesome.
Commission. So look through there. It's called the Artist Entrepreneur Incubator Program.
Yeah. And I think that's a great example, again, of like, there's so much low-hanging fruit. Like, there's so many people that just want to help you along your journey. And that it's like the only barrier is between you and just the application. So like, yes, just going after those things, especially when it's going to leave you with more tools than you started with, like that's wonderful. And I love hearing business development because we are all businesses. We should develop ourselves like that. Yeah.
My big question, and you kind of alluded to it just then, how do you motivate yourself to go through the process?
My secret is Sour Patch Extreme gummies. I'm really serious.
I'm getting ready to write down this great list that you haven't shared.
I mean, but like there is like, first of all, it's amazing. And you have to go with the extreme because you got to sort of torture yourself. It can't be the regular ones. But there is also this like weird psychological study that they like just came out with. And it's a very large study group. So it's like legit. That they correlated eating sour things as a good release of trauma. And I think that's why it's tied so good. Like it tricks your brain out of the fight, flight, freeze zone because the sour shocks your system so much. So even though it is a personal preference, there is a tiny bit of science. Yes. But yeah, so treats aside, I give like the biggest thing is I just give myself enough time to get frustrated. Like I really try really hard to not dictate based on FOMO, like fear of missing out. I think like so you can so easily get in a really bad cycle with grants, with calls for shows, with all kinds of submissions of the moment you see it is the moment you need to apply. And then all of a sudden you're spending 10 hours in one night when you only have 2 days left and whatever, because by the time it comes across your feed, a lot of people use Instagram for this. By the time it comes in front of you, they're sending out their like last call, like, get this in when you can. And it probably is a great opportunity and it reads as a great opportunity and our brains make us think we have to get on this now. And just trying to practice the discipline of seeing those things and being like, you know what? I'm going to put this on the calendar for next year. Like, I'm going to let this one go because I don't have enough time to treat myself kindly as I'm going through this process. So I'm going to make a note of it. I'm going to save this application. I'm going to bookmark their organization, and I'm going to put it literally on my Google Calendar. Like I usually, yeah, exactly. And I put an alarm on it, like, this time next year, it's going to give me a ping that says, go check out the Rabbit Run residency or Rabbit Island residency is one of those. I always forget about it until it's right due.
It just passed.
It just passed. But it's on my calendar for next year. And then, when it comes to actually writing it, I try to just chunk it up into smallest pieces as possible. Really rely on doing prep work, especially if you're building out your business as a business plan. Like that's content that once you sit down and you create that content, you can use that in all kinds of places. The other thing is I save every grant I wrote. And I go back and I review them and I make sure this is the copy that is the final copy, not the final, whatever, all the tricks that you do. And then I look at it and say, was there something worth keeping in this? Like I'll go back through with a really harsh knife and be like, that was crap. I'm going to cut that paragraph, but I love this sentence. And then I'll use that for the next time. So I just try to figure out ways to stay kind with myself, to not repeat work if I don't have to, but the same degree, do not submit one application for everything because they will know that it's not tailored to them. So yeah, chunking things out, trying to be kind to yourself, eat something sour. And then like going back to that celebrate, like honestly, I make everybody know around me that I just finished a grant. And I will treat myself to dinner. I will spend a day just celebrating me. And it's important to celebrate when you turn it in, not only when you get it. Because when you get it, that makes that even more exciting. But like when you don't get it, you've already done your celebration. You've already moved on to the next thing. It doesn't matter. And then my biggest thing just across the board is I try to get into seasons where I apply to so many things that I have forgotten what I applied for. So then it's just a surprise either way of like, oh yeah, I did that thing. I didn't get it. Okay, whatever, trash. To, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about this. And now this is happening. This is amazing. But, playing that number game where you sort of confuse yourself and it just keeps you moving, sort of like playing with delusion until you're faced with reality, but you create a warm spot for you to land. Yeah.
I have the same approach. I try to apply to enough things regularly that I forget what I've applied to. Mm-hmm. And it is kind of wonderful because then it's like when I get that rejection, it's like, oh, I totally forgot about you. But then I do, like when I get that acceptance and read it thinking it's a rejection and then wait a minute, this says something different. I have found one of the things that helps me not rush is I've gotten, the way I organize is you can see this chart. So this is stuff on here that I missed. But in Rabbit Island is one that I'm like, I forgot it wasn't even on here, which is why I forgot about it. Rabbit Island residency, it's amazing.
It looks so great.
It looks amazing. It's an island in one of the Great Lakes, and you go out there, and especially if your work is environmentally connected, Rabbit Island residency, put that down. I use Google Drive, and the process I have now is I have a folder for each year of my submissions, mm-hmm. 2024, 2023, all my drafts are in there. I tried, what I'm about to share with you, I tried it in Google Drive, it hasn't worked out as well, so it's on my desktop, but I have a submission folder. Mm-hmm. So that folder is, if I'm submitting visual work, it's images that I like and I'm going to use. If it's something I've written, I will save it there. And in the title, I will save it. So for example, in creative writings or nonfiction, but in written submissions, sometimes the work has to be anonymous. Sometimes it has to be in some specific font, which is ridiculous. But in the title of that file, I will say, this will be like, one of my short stories is Worm Turn Pie, and then I'll title it, so Worm Turn Pie, anonymous, Times New Roman font, so that when I see it on my desktop, I know exactly if it fits or not. That has proven really helpful for me. and the Google Doc. And if I miss it, I miss it. If I don't, I don't. But and then having the 100-word and the 100 and it's now for me it's a 100-word bio and then a longer bio in the same Google Doc, and then I just under each bio put last updated, and I'll put the date. And so these little tricks that work for me. You may organize things differently, but the key is figure out what works for you and then just stick with that, and it takes out a lot of the stress.
Yeah, create a system and stay with it. Yeah, no, I do the same. And I will say, just this is off topic, but I don't want to leave without saying this. Keep applying to places that say no to you. You don't know why they said no. Like, you don't know if the people that reviewed them are going to be the same people that review it next time. Sometimes, especially in the art world, that this is something that has been brought to my attention relatively recently, but sometimes folks will stick you on a, like, we're watching you list, and you don't even know. So they might say, like, I don't think you're career ready yet for this opportunity, but you have done enough correct that we're keeping an eye on you. And so if you never reapply to that, if you take one rejection as all rejections, then they've put you on a list and for no reason. So, and I've also, this is awful, but the visual art world is cruel. I've also heard from curators in really high positions, especially in New York, that there are places that will systematically reject you as a test to see if you're committed. So you might get like 3 rounds of rejection before they'll take you seriously. And that was soul crushing to hear when I first heard it, but then also understanding to go back and like, what can I do to take myself out of this and view it as a number game and just be like, all right, cool. Then let me get my 3 rejections out of the way. Like, one of them that I've been looking at forever, I just got my second one, so I'm getting closer, 2 rejections down. It might work on the 4th try, but yeah, just don't let that like embarrassment or shame like enter you. That's not what this is about. And again, you have no idea why they rejected you. It could have nothing to do with you whatsoever. It could be they just funded something that looked like it. It could be, we've done too many sculptures. We're going to do all painting right now. Or like, it's so arbitrary based on other people's decisions. Never let that define you or change how you approach things. Just keep going at it, which is a lot easier said than done. I know, but we can do it. Yeah.
Have you, either of you ever tried to do a partnership or like a sponsorship with like a local business or even a bigger business to do some kind of trade or get funding from a business directly to do your project?
I've done partnerships with other businesses to do programmatic grants. So that's like where you're doing like memorandum of understanding, where you're doing like a joint letter of like, this company supports what I'm doing, and I've leveraged that support for a grant. I haven't done any like direct work exchange where I'm getting something from that group for me, but like, especially like I have a youth programming pass, and youth funders really love knowing that businesses support it, or like young folks are being introduced to entrepreneurial opportunities and stuff. So there is like strategic ways to partner with people. And that's a really interesting line, because I really think it's like goes back to like what your overall goal for the project is. But it would never hurt if you saw an opportunity for your project to overlay with another mission of another organization, to make them aware of you and to like position yourself in a way that you could get that letter of reference or that letter of a memorandum of understanding and stuff like that. So, because that could beef up your portfolio and your presentation to somebody, and maybe be the outlier thing that you get chosen that year versus rejected. That's a great point. But in
short film, because businesses love to have their name in the credits, but nowhere else. I was trying to think, because I probably would not work in trade, because trade's not going to pay the rent or student loans.
I will say, this is my favorite story from my undergrad. I'm sorry to interrupt you, because it's amazing. So I went to Maryland Institute College of Art, and they have a phenomenal painting program. It's an open campus. So, there's not a defined campus. You're just like in the middle of Baltimore. There was a bar across the street from the painting department in the 70s. A student came into that bar and said to the bartender, or the owner of the place that was also the bartender, "What do I have to do to drink for free here for life?" And the guy just totally didn't even think about it. Was like, "You paint me the Sistine Chapel on my ceiling, and then you can drink for free." If you go to this bar, it's called the Mount Royal Tavern. It is the seediest, most wonderfully disgusting bar possible. And they have the most beautiful rendering of the Sistine Chapel ceiling on their ceiling. And it's amazing. And you get to see the dude. He still drinks there for free. And I think he's never moved because of that. But like, so, you know, it's just like, if you have a dream, go chase it. The worst thing they could say is no. But it's like, you should Google pictures because it does not make sense. Like, it's amazing.
What's the name of the bar?
It's called the Mount Royal Tavern.
And I guess that does help him pay student loans because he doesn't have to buy beer.
No.
You save so much.
Yeah. He's been there for a while.
He's only 27, but he looks like he's 58.
Touche.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Did you look it up? It's beautiful.
Yeah.
You mentioned before about targeting grants, like advertising stuff. I've got several novels out, and that's one of the stages I'm at right now. How do you tailor target to something like that use?
I just told him that's what I was going to use it for.
Okay.
It was a professional development grant. It was from the Mississippi Arts Commission. It was like $500 or something, and I said, "Can I use this for advertising?" And they said, "Oh yeah, sure." So, but in doing so, I would say, how is it going to help you?
Right.
What publication, what visibility, what circulation does it have? I got the money. Yeah, it was great. And
Under professional development.
yeah, it was a professional development grant. And I will say this too. I've gotten 2 grants I was living in Mississippi at the time. When I applied for the individual project grant, it was the first year they did it. They had less than 20 applicants. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know that they turned anybody down because they had so few applicants that first year. Now it's not like that anymore, but don't be afraid to apply.
Yeah.
And if you see something, just ask.
Mm-hmm.
I have talked to the South Carolina Arts Commission for organizations that I write grants for, and they're very easy to talk to as well. So I feel like the state arts commissions really try to help the artists, and case in point, what you were saying. And so, yeah.
Yeah. That's literally where they make their funding, is by proving that they are helping artists get their feet under them. Yeah.
So you can just straight up say, "I need this money for X, Y, Z," and it just doesn't matter as long as you go to the right place.
Yes. Yeah. Because if you can define, I need money for X, Y, and Z, there is a grant out there that will support you. And that's the beginning of my presentation breaks it down in that way too. So you can figure out, am I looking for a business grant? Am I trying to turn the thing into a business and then therefore would qualify for it? Am I looking to start a program with this? And there's programmatic, and program would be something that would pay for material, labor, and other costs. So really understanding what is the landscape out there. But if you start with your idea and then work backwards, you can find something. And then if you can't, the other session that I would talk about if I had all the time in the world is self-funding, which, there's all kinds of opportunities to figure out, how do you fundraise? How do you use fundraising as a way to promote? How do you ask for folks? There's so many ways that we can get to where we're going, that the road shouldn't be what stops us just because we have to create it in some spaces. Yeah.
That reminded me of something I heard way back when I was first looking at grants. Have you ever dealt with matching funds
Yes.
for grants?
Yeah.
So can you maybe do one grant against another? Look, this grant's supporting you here, and this one's supporting the matching funds with that?
It all comes down to the fine print of what they're looking for, because sometimes some matching grants want you to put skin in the game so that you show a financial commitment. Some folks, this would go back to partnering with other businesses. Some folks want to know that you have roots in the community. So they're looking for, are you getting a low dollar thing? Some would qualify for I can't pay for it myself. I can't hook up with a community, but I'm throwing a house party and I'm charging $5 at the gate, and that's going to be the matching funds that come down. So just pay attention really to the requirements, because sometimes they're asking for different ones, and sometimes they don't want to see things like. I've seen matching grants where they don't want you to have another grant. They want you to prove that you have another way of securing this money. So just paying attention to the fine print. Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing. I want to give our speakers a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching to the end. If this video taught you something new or helped you in any kind of way, share this with the creative that is in your life, because this might be the big push that they need to do their next big thing. Like and subscribe, and remember to embrace creativity.